Hey folks, got another visual aid here for you today to help you out with your SOI courses. We're going to be going over maps and how to use them. When you finish with this video, and with a little time and practice, you should be able to predict what the lay of the land will look like before you even arrive in the AO, using only your map. First off, you'll actually need to open up your map with the M key, M as in Mike. That'll bring you to this screen here, which in this case is showing a map of Stratus. Let's go over some basics before we dive into the more difficult concepts. In the top left corner of the map, you'll see ArmA's menu overlay. You can see the mission file as well as info like the list of players and more. In the top right, you'll see your in-game rank as well as your player name. Moving on, you'll see this button here, which looks like a stack of papers or a folded map. This is your texture selection button. It allows you to switch from the current relief map mode, the one that looks like a satellite image, to the topographic map mode, which removes extra terrain imagery, making some things easier to see. As soon as you switch to topographic map mode, you'll see a whole bunch of lines, which I'll take you through right now. These smaller lines going all over the place are known as contour lines because they follow the contours or the shape of the land. They are useful because they show the slope of the land, giving you 3D information about a geographical land formation, but on a 2D map. Something else you might have noticed are these lines going vertically and horizontally across the map. These are called grid lines, and they're called that because of the way they break the map up into grids. These grid lines provide you with a quick and easy method of referencing a smaller portion of the map. If you look at the top, bottom, or the sides of the map, you ought to see a small set of numbers. These are the grid line's reference coordinates. When you want to reference a specific area of the map, you want to do what's called reading a grid. Grids are the square areas of a map that are created when the vertical and horizontal lines cross each other. A grid has what's called a grid reference, or the digits leading to the grid in question. The grid reference is made up of the coordinates of both the x-axis, which can be found at the top or the bottom of your map, and the y-axis, which is at either side of your map. To read a grid, you'll begin with the x-axis, similar to reading a graph. The vertical lines are a guide for your eyes so that you can easily follow the reference digits of the x-axis to the middle of the map. Think of a grid as a graph so that you can easily remember that a grid starts at the left side and at the bottom. On a map, you'll start from the left side of the grid, following the vertical line back to the top or the bottom digits, giving you your x coordinates. Make a note of those numbers. Once you've made a note of the x coordinates by following the vertical line of your grid back to the x-axis at either the top or the bottom, you'll need to repeat the process with the horizontal lines of the y-axis. Once more, starting from the bottom of your grid area, follow that horizontal line back to either side of the map, where the y-axis coordinates are located. Add these y coordinates to the x coordinates and you'll have your grid reference. The grid in question has a grid reference of 0404. Now that you know a little bit more about finding a grid reference, we can get a little bit more detailed with it. The x coordinates and the y coordinates right now are just 2 digits each. At this level, the grids are 1 kilometer wide by 1 kilometer long. If you zoom in a little bit, you'll see that this reference changes, and the reference coordinates go from 2 each to 3 each. At this level, the grids are 100 by 100 meters long now. The 100 by 100 level grid is what we call a 6-digit grid, because the grid reference is made up of 6 digits, 3 from the x-axis and 3 from the y-axis. A 6-digit grid is the most common grid reference you'll give. You can find it in the same way that you found the 4-digit grid earlier. Use the vertical line to give you your x-axis, and then use the horizontal line to give you your y-axis coordinates. By using the different levels of the grids, you can also approximate the distances between objects, which comes in handy as a planning tool for the future. Now I'm going to have you find a grid for me. I'm going to go ahead and put it up on the screen here. Please look at the grid 025061. Did you find it? It's this grid right here with the numbers along the left and the bottom. I've marked this grid in order to explain to you what's called an 8-digit grid. ArmA doesn't include an 8-digit grid level to zoom into on our maps like we could with the 4 and the 6-digit grids, so we have to create these grids by ourselves. What's an 8-digit grid? Well, if you guessed it's a grid made up of 4x digits by 4y digits, you'd be correct. An 8-digit grid breaks up the 100 by 100 meter area of a 6-digit grid down into 10 by 10 meter grids. 8-digit grids are extremely useful in that they give you a very specific location, in case you've got to let friendly mortars know where not to shoot. The downside to these is that finding an 8-digit grid requires a bit of time to figure out. Because it's slower to find and remember an 8-digit grid, usually you'll only use them in very specific conditions. To find an 8-digit grid, you don't need to make all these marks I've made, but you will need to estimate where these marks would be. To start, you'll find your 6-digit grid, which I've already given to you in this case, 025061. Once you have that, you'll need to add the x-axis coordinate and the y-axis coordinate of the 8-digit grid to these 6 digits you already have. So, as I've posted now, you will be filling in this grid reference. The bottom of the grid is broken into 10 pieces, 0 through 9, as a way of extending the x-axis. The side is similarly broken down into 10 pieces, extending the y-axis. The 0 would be here, and this would not be 10, but 0 of the next grid. Think of these as an extension of the digits at the top and the bottom, or at the sides of the map, depending on the case. Once you do that, it's the same basic process as before. Again, using the left side of your approximated grid, you'll follow your vertical line back down to this now extended x-axis, giving you that one extra digit that you'll add into your grid ref. You'll add this into your 6-digit grid reference I've already given you, filling out that last x coordinate. So if my grid is here, my grid would now be 0258061y, because we still do not know the y. To find the y digit, trace the horizontal line back to the y-axis extension, in the same way as how you found the x digit. You'll add this to your y coordinates at the end, giving you the 8th and final digit. Again, 8 digits are confusing unless you think of them as further dividing each axis at the top and the bottom or the sides. Now, if you don't have time to give an 8-digit grid because you're under fire or some other situation, you can give a sector. In the grid 024060, we can see the grid already marked out into sectors. Again, where these stop and start are approximated, but they allow you to give a quick and relatively specific position within a grid. If you have any questions, you can always talk to your instructors. For now, just keep practicing and you'll have this down in no time. So keep up the good work and I'll see you out there on the battlefield. Thanks for watching.